And without any further ado, I do want to get to our speaker. So Juno is a friend of mine. We actually met, must have been like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. I can't really remember, but we've been friends for years. So he is a very unassuming type of leader that doesn't like to share the spotlight. And for a lot of them, that he and his family kind of flies under the radar. But he is the CEO of the Koa Pancake House for the last 5 years, and so he's been working in business his whole life. He went to business school, graduated Chaminade 2007, and went after to work full time with his parents and alongside for them for 5 years. He left for some time, so was in New York, started his own outlet company for his own personal passion called My Outlet, which is a clothing company. And I'll have him share a little bit about that. And he came back and he essentially took over leadership. So today is a little bit to share about the story of a local family restaurant business and his transition to leadership. This will be a little bit more of a moderated Q&A, just to make sure that for his side that he wants to share what we're looking for. So I'll just guide it a little bit and we'll have a Q&A section after. So thank you for joining us, Juno. And I guess the first question is, when we had our previous conversation, you noted you always wanted to do business. Would you say that there was somewhat of a personal passion side of being in business, or would you say that working with your parents from a young age kind of created that business mindset from you?
So if you talk to my father, he would always say that this was kind of his dream to have one of his children take over, or all of his children take over the family business eventually. And when my older sisters started going off in their own path, they were like, I guess you're the one. I guess you're the one that has to take over. So I didn't know this, but my father was secretly grooming me to take over ever since I was able to work. And I didn't know that, but my mother was telling me over the years recently that, that was secretly my father's plan his whole life. But, I didn't know that I was going to take over the family business. I always wanted to be in the clothing industry. I was a little bit of a rebel growing up. So, I skateboarded, I surfed, I never did any organized sports. And that was kind of the direction that I wanted to go in, which is why I left the family business for a little bit, moved to New York and started my own clothing company called My Outlet, which was literally my outlet. It was something that I enjoyed doing. And the reason why I started that also was because, I battled with depression and anxiety, and that company was something that kind of helped me with, my depression and anxiety. Hence the name My Outlet.
I see. So would you say, and you don't need to share anything you're not interested in sharing for the sake of your personal information. Would you say after kind of learning about depression that you learned that, I guess there's more people that have it, that work with it? I guess, what did you sort of learn about the mental side and mental?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because once I started telling my closest friends about, what I was going through at the time with depression and anxiety, I started realizing that more of my friends are also in the same boat. It's kind of similar to, when I talk about the restaurant industry and I talk with other restaurant owners, like we start sharing more about, what we're going through. And, sorry, what was the question was, sorry, I'm going off here. What was the question again?
That's cool. Just sharing a little bit about the journey.
Yeah, I mean, I realized that there are a lot more people than I thought that also suffer or go through, depression and anxiety. And it's interesting because when I start sharing my story more, and like you said earlier, I was a little bit more of a private person. But once I started sharing my story, people started coming out and just telling me that they're also going through it. And, it's funny because I never thought that some of the people that came out, was also going through the same thing, which is why I want to kind of go back to that eventually. Once I stabilize the business a little bit more with Koa Pancake House, I would want to go back to that business. It is a little bit of my passion project. So, but obviously due to COVID, the restaurant is taking up a lot of my time right now. So I don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully soon.
I see. So why don't we go over a quick origin story? How did your family start Koa Pancake House?
So in the early 80s, actually Koa Pancake House started as a Eggs and Things. So Eggs and Things was in Kaneohe. This was in the early 80s. And they decided to move to town in Waikiki. And then a guy that imported wood for a living decided that he wanted to get into the restaurant industry. So he opened up a restaurant called Koa House. And what he did was, because he imported wood to Hawaii, he decided, I'm going to decorate the whole interior with koa wood, with real koa wood. And you know how expensive that could be. So he did that, and that's where the name Koa comes from. And then about a year of operating that restaurant, he decided, like, what am I doing? Like, I hate the restaurant industry. So he sold the restaurant, and it changed hands a few times. And then it eventually got to my parents in 1988. And my parents have been operating it ever since. So we actually didn't come up with the name Koa, nor do we have a family member named Koa or yeah.
So was it, because I come from a background of similar from a store. So my grandpa and grandma owned Tom's Grocery, and it was kind of assumed that all the kids had to help out in the store. Would you say that it's an assumption that you had as kids growing up that you had to help out?
That's a correct assumption. So me and my sisters were, I wouldn't say forced, but we were forced to work in the family business growing up. Back then we only had one location, and all throughout high school and even before high school, my mother would pick me up from school if I had a half day, and I would spend my time in the restaurant, and my mother would teach me how to work the register. And I just remember people coming up to me being like, show me your worker's permit. You don't look old enough to work. This is child labor. But yeah, I just always helped out in the restaurant. And even my sisters, when they would come back from college, they would help out in the family business. But after they graduated, they decided, we're no longer doing this. And I obviously took a different path.
Yeah, I think that's fairly similar, that the majority of them are like, I'm never doing this ever again.
Yep.
And maybe one of them ends up taking up the family business. Would you say that's pretty typical, that sort of the transition from the parents' generation to the kids' generation, that, there's somewhat of a difficulty of finding, hey, I'd like you to take over, but no one wants to?
Yeah, when I talk to other family business owners, I'm starting to realize that we all kind of go through the same thing. A lot of it is butting heads with how the second generation or the third generation wants to run the business and how it differs from the previous generations. And that's definitely the case with me. And I think that's why I'm so close with a lot of other family business owners, is because, like they say, misery enjoys company, right? Like I haven't found one family business where everything went smoothly with the transition, or, there wasn't any butting heads. So yeah, I often talk to them and vent to them, and we just share our stories together.
I see. So what would you say, if you could kind of summarize the challenges you have of generational kind of changes in leadership? whether you want to share yours personally or.
Yeah, I'll share my personal story. So with my parents, they're very big on if it's not broke, don't fix it. I have a very different mentality. And for a while, my parents used to call me, my nickname was Obama, because when Obama was running for presidency, his whole campaign was change, right? My parents were like, "You're exactly like Obama. You want to create all this change, and it costs money to create this change. It's not cheap." So yeah, my nickname was Obama, and the analogy that I kept giving my parents was, with the phone, right? Everybody remembers back in the day that like Zach Morris phone, that big brick with the giant antenna. And, I used to tell my parents that that was a phone, but that worked perfectly fine. You were able to make calls and receive calls. But now today, right, we have the iPhone, whatever, right, 11 or 12, or I don't even know what number they're on, but right, it does much more than just be a telephone. You have like internet, you have games on there, it's a calculator, it has a bunch of different apps. So I always tell my parents that that's kind of what I want to do with the business, where I want to just improve things. And yes, the phone wasn't broken, right? And our business isn't broken, but I do feel like we could improve things a lot. So, till this day, I battle my parents on that. And even though they're not necessarily involved in the business, I look to them more as like a board of directors, and I go to them every now and then, and I just explain to them what I plan to do. And I try to get their buy-in. As I don't always do get their buy-in, but I realize that I can't always. I'm not always going to get their buy-in, and that's okay. And my parents also realize that they kind of got to let me go. They got to let me spread my wings and fly. I'm going to be making mistakes. Not everything is going to work, but they ultimately realize that, they just got to let me make those mistakes and fail forward. Right.
So would you say that, how has your guys' communication or your ability to lead changed from when you first started and came back, so kind of year one as CEO to year 5 as CEO, where you are now?
I would say I listen to them a lot more. I actually value like the feedback that they give me. I would say, in year one, my dad said I was like, I had a very big ego, and I made some changes in the company early on, and they all happened to just work. So my dad was like, "Oh no, this guy's bound for failure because his ego is so big. Everything is working out for him. Like, he's just going to think that everything he does is going to turn into gold." And yeah, I mean, I was on that track, and I don't know if you guys remember, but I went off and did my own little side project, and it was called Koa Cafe. And it was like my version of what I wanted Koa Pancake House to be. And it was a disaster. From day one, we were losing money, and we lost a lot of money with that project. And I ended up selling one of the locations off, and the other one we ended up converting it to a Koa Pancake House. But I lost a lot of money with that. And I remember going to my father and telling him about like, how much money I was losing and all the mistakes that I've made. And my dad was just smiling from ear to ear. And I'm like, how's this guy like, like here I am, like just kind of telling him about like all the losses that that I made and mistakes that I made. And he's laughing at me. And my dad was like, "I'm finally glad that like you came down to reality, because I just felt like you were just, you were on cloud nine. You were just making all these, nothing could stop you. And finally, this has kind of slowed you down a bit." And, I was really down because, I lost a lot of money. I lost a lot of the company's money. And my father stopped me and he's like, "You didn't lose that money." And the analogy that he gave me was, everybody went to school and school costs money, right? And he told me to look at it as tuition. He's like, you go to school and you learn, right? You learn a lesson and you learn something when you go to school, but it's not free. And he said in business, it's no different. In business, you're going to be making mistakes, but the main thing is that you learn from those mistakes and look at that as like business tuition. So, he was telling me next time, make sure that tuition is maybe a KCC tuition rather than like a Harvard MBA program. So yeah, I mean, moving forward, I'm definitely going to make sure that my lessons are a lot cheaper.
I definitely know how you feel. So with some of the newer agents that I see, and a lot of the other realtors in here can agree, is if a new agent starts getting business right off the bat, it's kind of the same thing. It's a bad sign because they think that real estate's easy until they hit something. For me, like I've had the worst week in my real estate career. I essentially lost a $2 million listing. The deal fell apart and the sellers canceled the whole listing itself. So totally know how you feel in that regard. There's a lot of crying involved, but after you cry, you gotta pick yourself back and get to it. So a big part of the challenges, I think that COVID has challenged a lot of fundamentals of how we see business. For you, coming into sort of 2020, obviously you had a lot of big dreams. When did it kind of hit for you that COVID was something you had to address?
So in my office, I wish I was in my office because I have a big giant chalkboard in the back, and we wrote down a bunch of important dates and just important things. And March 19th was one of them. And that was the day that they closed dine-in for us. So for me, that was the day that really, that we really felt the impacts of COVID. And yeah, it did really throw a wrench into the mix because, for us, we were planning on opening up a location this year. We were thinking of expanding, and due to COVID, obviously we didn't, and thank God we didn't before COVID. And I would say that we got kind of lucky in that sense because we saved up some money in a company, and we were going to use that to open up a location. But what that really did for us was just, we're using that money right now just to get through COVID, right? Like we're not making money at this point. We're losing money every month. And that fund that was supposed to be used to open up another location is now being the COVID relief fund.
I see. And when everything happened with COVID, what were your initial thoughts and what did you do? And if you can kind of take us through the first month of how COVID affected your business and what you sort of felt and thought and how you wanted to move forward.
The first thing I did, which was a shock to my parents, was I went to my parents and I asked them, what do we do? And my parents were like, you're asking us for advice? Like, you never ask us for advice. But yeah, I went to them and I was like, I don't know what to do at this point. Like, how do we pivot? What do we do? And my parents looked at me and they were like, we've never been through this. In the 30 years that we've been in business, we've never seen a pandemic like this before. So it's up to you. And that was a scary moment because I always felt like I had my parents in my back pocket, even though I didn't really, use their advice at times. I always just felt like that was my safety net. And for the first time, they came back to me and told me, we don't know. And my parents always have an answer. They always give me advice. They always, right? So that's when I really felt like, okay, I got to take charge at this point. And my parents put me in charge and that's what I got to do. So one of the first things that we did was we implemented online ordering. And in our company, we have these things called rocks. And these are 90-day action items where we create a project for our management team. And normally it's a giant project that should take about 3 months to complete. And one of the things on there was online ordering. And we got that done in a week and a half. we reached out to our POS machine, which is Square. We reached out to our photographer. We got all the pictures set. We got all the back end and front end and everything, and front of the house and back of the house trained on, how the orders are going to be coming in and everything. And it was exhausting. But we felt like it was a pivot that needed to be done. And currently to this day, right now, it's about 28 to 30% of our sales. So if it wasn't for that, I don't know what our sales would be. I can't, but when COVID first hit, our sales were about 55 to 60% down, just right off the bat, in one day. And, we just kept pushing online ordering. We created promos and discounts when you do online ordering. And yeah, right now we're about, like 21 or 22% down in sales. But yeah, online sales being 30%, right? That really helped. Another thing we did was curbside pickup. We started that for a little bit, but some of our landlords shut us down. They said that it was creating traffic, in the parking lots. But my mentality was, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. So we just went ahead and done all those things. And then, we got the letters from the landlord saying, hey, you can't do this and can't do that. But during this time, it's a hectic time, right? And I just felt like I needed to do what I needed to do to keep the business afloat. And yeah, if I had to put one word to summarize everything, it would just be exhausting, because it's just a lot of pivots. I'm tired of hearing the word pivot, actually.
So it sounds like it was the most challenging time in your CEO-ship. Would you say that's a correct assumption?
Yeah. It was the first time in my life where I realized what my parents have done to get the business to where it's at. I used to look at our sales and be like, we can do better. Like, this is nothing. Like, we should be doing better numbers. We should be doing better profits and doing all these things. And my parents, like, the whole time where I've had a recent discussion with my parents about this, and they were like, we would look at you and be like, are you crazy? Like, we're good. You know what I mean? Like, our numbers are good. Like, try and start your own. And, and I did. And, but they were like, any business would be happy with our numbers, and who are you to come in here and say that our numbers aren't good? And after COVID hit, I just constantly been telling myself, if I could just get back to the numbers pre-COVID, right? Like, that would just be perfect. So it made me just realize, wow, like, my parents did a lot, and I never once told my parents, like, you guys did a great job, like, to what you guys have done, to get the business to where it's at. So it really humbled me a lot. It really made me appreciate everything that my parents have done. And as crazy as it sounds, but it took COVID for me to realize that.
That's great. I think there's that part where challenges really define who you are and help you to reorient what's important and how you move forward. And I think that sounds like it's great for you in the business and the relationship that you have with your parents. Last question, then we'll open up to Q&A. Is there any plugs you want to do for any of your personal passions, anything else outside of the business? Obviously, business is consuming your life, but anything else that you'd like to share about things that you enjoy doing?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I was a little bit of a rebel growing up. I've never did really organized sports growing up. I did, I skateboarded, I surfed, I do jiu-jitsu now. And that's kind of what my outlet is about, that company. And I don't want to plug it now, only because if you go on the website, I haven't updated the website in years, so it's not the most current. But that's what that company is all about. The tagline for that company is, what's your outlet? And for me, that company was my outlet to life. That's what kept me sane. It helped me get through, and I'm still battling depression, so I can't say I'm over it, but it really helped me cope with my depression and anxiety. and things like jujitsu, surfing, skateboarding, those kind of things, everybody has their different outlets. And, with that company, once I get it back started, I was thinking about turning it into a nonprofit organization where all the profits go back to help somebody's outlet, right? So let's say I create, and I want it to be something more than just a clothing brand. So let's say I create a skateboard with that logo on it. And the logo it looks like an outlet, like a regular electrical outlet, but the face of the outlet, the bottom part is turned upside down. So it looks like a happy face. So it's the outlet that makes you happy. And so let's say I create a skateboard and I sell all these skateboards. I want to donate that profit to help build a skate park somewhere. Or, if I do something with surfing, help clean up a beach, right? To help keep that outlet alive. But again, don't go on that website or don't do any research on that yet, because I'm a little bit embarrassed that I haven't updated it in a while. But, I really feel like, especially during this time, a lot of people are going through depression, right? Like a lot of their outlets are being taken away, right? Like just with the new mandate, you can't go to the beach, you can't go outdoors, you can't do some of these things. And for some people, that was their outlet. That was the thing that kept them sane, day to day. So I really feel like mental health is important right now, and I want to bring awareness to that.
Awesome. If you're interested, I'd love to do a joint project with our club and you personally, or with you and EO about mental health.
Yeah.
Those speakers in the future is going to be, regarding that for kids. And I think that would be a perfect opportunity to do something together.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do want to say thank you for your presentation, for sharing. You're a great guy, a good friend. Congratulations on your reveal, your gender reveal recently.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And so any other questions opening up to the floor? Does anyone have any questions they want to ask to Juno? Yeah, Calvin.
Hey, just a comment. You guys got good fried rice.
Oh, I'm so bummed to hear that, because we were actually talking about changing up our fried rice. And that was one of the things that, my parents were like, no, don't change it up. We have customers that love our fried rice. And me personally, when I eat our fried rice at a restaurant, I do things different to it. I add a little bit more vegetables to it. I put bacon instead of ham. And for me, my whole thing is, if I don't eat it myself, I don't feel comfortable selling it to others. But I will tell my mother that, because she's going to be happy to hear someone say that. Thank you, though.
Hi, what's one of the favorite dishes there? What's the most popular?
So our most popular dish, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but it's just bacon and eggs. I guess people just don't want to cook at home. Yeah, majority of our customers order bacon and eggs for breakfast. But another popular dish is our kalbi. It's my mother's recipe, and only recently has my mother given me the recipe. So my mother, she had a pacemaker put in her heart, so she had to do a little operation. And right before that operation, my mother hands me this binder and says, "This is the marinade for the kalbi recipe." And it took a heart surgery for my mother to pass that on to me. But I think it's great. And we don't really do a lot of advertising. And one of the things that we wanted to do was just change the name of it to like Mama's Kalbi and Eggs or something, right? Because I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah. Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Time for one more question. So anyone that wants to ask a question or make a comment.
I'll make a comment. I recommend the Vinha Doce.
Are you Portuguese? Because you said it. Oh, okay. Because
I'm Japanese, but yeah, every time I go in there, I end up ordering that.
And not a lot of people know how to pronounce it correctly. So yeah, kudos to you. Yeah, it's a Portuguese dish, and it's shredded pork, and it's marinated in like vinegar. It's kind of like a adobo. But Portuguese people get really upset when I compare it to adobo. They're like, no, it's our own dish. It's like different, but I mean, it has that similar flavors. So yeah, it's also one of my favorites.
Mm. Mm. Okay, so I think that's all time we have for the meeting. If you do want to stay and ask some questions after, more than happy for you to share about you know, your experiences with Koa Pancake House. So we'll close it up.